if you remember, the Real Fridays, the kernel of the idea that turned into this was we just talk anyway, usually on Fridays, but whenever we can, and why not share it? So we're back to, I feel like we're back to that today, at least. Sometimes Rick tries to like really professionalize the guest interview questions, but Real Fridays was supposed to be like not overdoing the formality. So let's do that
Yeah.
today.
I seem to remember as well that when we first started, we were trying to bring drinks on it and have it be like a happy hour type thing, but it shifted a little bit earlier in the day. So that's only
It could be, I think the 4 p.m. Friday, 4 p.m. Friday became a tough time to like make sure we were all on the same thing. And for some reason, 12:30 on a Friday worked, but then didn't necessarily work for drinks. Unless you're Rick, I think he just has one all the time, but
yeah,
he's not here to defend himself.
He's at a cabin in Vermont or whatever. But yeah, all right. Well,
when he's not here, we have to make fun of him for something. If I was going to make fun of him for something, either, constantly asking me to be his Valentine or drinking too much on a Friday, one or the other. It was going to be something. It was going to be something.
May as well be both. Yeah. What have you been up to this week, other than getting a haircut, it looks like?
Thank you. I know my hair is a constant topic on Real Fridays. To be honest, like I have a different question to ask you, I think, relative to some of the industry stuff, but honestly, my whole
I don't know who allowed this to happen, but Brian View is jumping. What's the terminology the kids use? Jumping our stream.
Great.
Hijacking.
Get in here. How's it going, Brian?
Hey guys, look I was just doing some QA work, and you failed, by the way.
That makes sense.
And maybe it was by design, but this link is like sitting out there on LinkedIn.
Perfect. I said it. We set it up right because Rick's delayed on a plane, and I had to back into it however I could. So that's good to know. So maybe we'll get some.
It's more of a virtual open house, is what you're saying, Brian. We may have whomever find it to jump on.
Anybody could pop in at any
given time. Let's hope so. What's up with
maybe
you,
BV? Maybe President Elon is watching, and President Elon will click in and talk to us.
Leon,
I would hope.
You mean Leon?
Elon. So yeah, man. Brock was just asking me about my week, and it's unavoidable, especially in my role with my background. It's unavoidable. It's all about regulatory and political issues. I mean, that was the whole week. I had clients asking me like, "What do you think? What should we do?" I had organizations, I'm on the board of the Massachusetts Mortgage Bankers Association. What do the members need to know? I'm sure MBA is asking the same question. What do the members need to know? So it was a need to know type week, but I didn't think that anything, even as uncertain and volatile as it was, and with different news. I saw a post yesterday from the MBA's commercial conference, which was happening in San Diego, and it reminded me that we've had essentially 3 directors of the CFPB in a week, because and probably less than a week if you really count it. It was probably more like 3 days or 4 days. And some of those were just placeholders and we knew it. But that's the problem, is like you're trying to tell people, I'm trying to tell clients advice. The advice is kind of like, it's a placeholder. It's all going to change in 48 hours anyway. So it's hard to do anything about it when that's the advice, I
think the best advice is don't screw up. Don't do anything wrong.
Yeah, don't change anything. Yeah, don't. If you weren't screwing consumers yesterday, don't start screwing them tomorrow. Is the idea?
Yeah.
It's all very like Parks and Rec, like Ron Swanson, like the head of the division, trying to eliminate the division. I mean, we've had 3 heads this week, and 2 have had their only orders be to shut down the division, basically.
So good.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of color there, I'm sure. But
isn't there like, art mimics life and life mimics art, and we're all human beings. And I think we've got one of the things I learned, and it's actually a lesson that's kind of exciting to me, that I'm reminded of this week, because I didn't learn it this week, but I was reminded of it this week, which is like, we take a lot for granted as like, oh, well, this is probably what's going to happen. And this is probably what's going to happen. And we live in these probabilities of like, I'm sure it'll be right in here. And you can use words like reasonable, or you can use words like other words. And some of those get politically charged in other platforms and in other context, I'm not really that interested in that stuff. But what it was a reminder was like, you don't have to live in probabilities. You don't have to live in reasonableness. You can live in action. And so I think like stuff that's happening this week is outside of what's the 80% bell curve of likely to happen and is sitting kind of outside the likely curve, but that's okay. Like, that's just a reminder that like, we're all human beings. Just like, this is all just a collection of human beings doing stuff every day. And this collection of human beings is doing stuff faster and more decisive than ever before. But that's not anything than just outside the curve a little bit. And so I don't know.
Maybe I'm looking for a lot of the curve. You know, a
lot of steps outside the curve, but I'm kind of looking for a silver lining here.
Terminology is like what? How many standard deviations away or whatever?
Standard deviation. That's what I was thinking.
We might be like 5 to 100 standard deviations away from what we consider normal this week, but you know, it's still.
Yeah, if you got laid off, like if you got laid off this week, you're feeling it, right? You're feeling like, oh, this was unreasonable. This was outside the curve. This isn't fair to me, because anyone who's been laid off knows that feeling. It's horrible. Like, it's, the uncertainty is terrible. And so I'm sure they're feeling that way too. And then everybody who's trying to run a business, especially a highly regulated business, is going, all right, do you plan for outside the 5th, 6th, 7th standard deviation, whatever you're saying, Brian? So I don't know. Brian, are you hearing the same stuff? I mean, I live in it because of the policy and legal stuff. Like, how's it been for you?
So most of my engagement is closer to the street level. And they're in, you know, loan officers today, they're obviously paying attention. They have their theories and thesis around potential impact. But like this week in particular, everyone I was talking to is just grinding out, you know, trying to continue to build their business going forward. And by and large, most people are just like, look at smarter people in the room are going to, you know, figure things out. I'm going to focus on the consumer and just, you know, do what I do every day to improve their lives. And in a lot of ways, I feel lucky to have that vantage point, because otherwise I think I might go a little crazy getting caught into the swirl, if you will.
Yeah. You probably have a very similar experience to me with it, Brian, of like, we hear it from our partners. Some of our partners, at least this happens to me, some of our partners sort of ask me how it, you know, affects NewsZip, how it affects maybe FinLocker in your case. Like, not a ton on the face of it, but also, you know, we have to kind of be aware of trends and things like that. If there's changes in how, in our case, you know, like RESPA interpretation or CFPB interpretation of real estate and mortgage partnerships and things like that. But the reality is, not much of this is like, there hasn't really been any policy change. It's just been moving resources around, moving, right? Like, is that right, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick example of one that kind of overlaps with housing. I work for Incentive Find. Incentive Find is a database of all the green incentives for every property address in America: green, energy efficiency, clean tech. So electrification of houses is a huge impact on homeowners because of the monthly payment, the investment up front versus the monthly payment long-term, cost of home ownership. You know, we've talked about a lot. Brian and I talk about the true cost of home ownership a lot. Anyway, so that's an example of where the Department of Energy, right, issues this money to homeowners, to programs that serve homeowners, and then to obviously commercial real estate property managers and homeowners as well. So like, that's an example, Brock, where there wasn't a policy change, but you couldn't get anybody from the Department of Energy to respond via email. You didn't know if your program contact still had a job. There was a lot of like calling to find out if your program was still in existence to get the money that you had planned on. So that type of uncertainty, it doesn't necessarily mean 3 or 4 weeks from now the dust will settle and that money's still there and that program is still there. It might be, but it also was pretty significant if it's not. If your point of contact got laid off, if your point of contact took the buyout, if the Department of Energy goes away entirely, the money you were counting on to like electrify homes for people who do the financing of electrification, who do the HELOCs and home improvement loans that serve renovation and upgrades and electrification, that's a big overlap with our industry. It's smaller players. You know, you don't see like necessarily Rocket out there with like a home improvement loan message anymore. I know they did at one point when we were there. Try
gonna
that.
say they had a pretty aggressive solar message the tail end of our time
At
there.
one point. But
Yeah.
like other lenders of other size, banks, credit unions, as well as those like, second lien lenders, that affects your business. If the people can't borrow money to do the green thing or the appliance thing or the HVAC thing or the EV charger thing that they were going to do. So that would be an example just from this
sure.
week that might be affecting.
Maybe this is a guest we should have on soon. But I saw Brad Cardwell out from Down Payment Resource out at IMB last week, and didn't get to talk to him a ton, but always talked to him a little bit in passing, and saw one of his LinkedIn posts around the same time, and he said, we track, throwing out not exactly the right numbers, we track 600 different federal down payment resource programs, and 280 of them are sort of unclear whether they still exist. And I'm paraphrasing pretty badly. He got the technicality of that much more accurate, but like that's the type of, I guess, like vibe of it, right? Where it's like, I don't know if these programs are there. Even the experts that are helping but helping connect to those programs don't know whether they should still connect them, it sounds like. So we'd have to have Brad on or someone else in that space on to unpack that a lot better than I could. But from like a headline and just like industry sentiment standpoint, that one kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, that's a good example. I'm gonna take this opportunity to kind of pivot a little bit, because I think
I'm gonna let you guys carry on with your show. I was just
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome back on. If you're
you're welcome anytime, Brian. So stick around if you want, but I know you're busy, so
I have to go prep for my Friday afternoon show too. So
all right, this
is like one of the, what do they call those? The
crossover. We're doing a crossover episode. Go watch Brian this afternoon.
Everyone pop on for Brian's show in 20 minutes.
We got to get you guys on the last word. Peace, guys.
Yeah, sounds good. Take care, Brian.
Lost my invite in the mail.
Hey, so where I was going to go with it, maybe just a footnote on the political stuff, and then pivot to my question to you. But the political stuff, like the one thing that I am really concerned about that I don't understand is there's a lot of data availability, like data in HUD, data in other agencies, that is also shut off, that's also being removed or shut down with the layoffs. And I'm not sure I fully understand that piece. I understand cutting costs, getting rid of government waste, getting the size of government down 30%, headcount 50%, stuff like that. I'm not really sure why you would remove databases and remove things at HUD that people use for research, that people use. With Rob Christman made a good point in today's commentary. Without CFPB, where's the HMDA data? A lot of people use HMDA data. A lot of people rely on HMDA data for their databases, for their products, for their research. So, if data is unavailable on a reporting basis from the federal government, like entire companies use HMDA data to enrich their products and their decision making.
I mean, so companies selling data as well as companies leveraging data. HMDA's
exactly
the base of most of it. Jeremy, let me pause you for a second. We had someone that I think was to Brian's point. I
trying to come on,
just trying to listen, but Pat from Better a second ago was probably just trying to listen. But I was going to see if he had a question and bring it up.
Welcome on. I love this open house.
Pat, we'd be happy to have you come into our open house version of the episode today.
That's right. Well, I'll take it back out of politics into mainstream media. So we're a couple days removed from the Eagles' big win, probably one of the most dominant Super Bowl performances I've ever seen in my entire life, if I had to put adjectives around it. And so one of the things the question I had for you, Brock, was there were two, I think, Homes.com commercials and one Rocket.com commercial. And one of the things that it made me think was Rocket celebrated today, I think, or whenever, that they are top of the financial brands commercials for the Super Bowl, which I think is right. It's a financial brand. But it's interesting to me that the mainstream media, advertising media, and probably the general public don't see Homes.com and Rocket.com as competitors. I think you and I are like, they're certainly competitors. They want to be competitors. And so I have a big picture question for you.
All right. I forgot a few things I could say to that. Let's hear the question though.
Homes.com doesn't seem to go past digital listings. Everything you need for digital listings, but it's just this point in time it's a point in time resource about the house. Presumably when it's listed, I'm sure it'll have all that data there when it's not listed. Like I could go find my house and it probably has some shit on there, but like it's not extending further than that yet. And Rocket, on the other hand, claims to extend further. This Rocket.com move was like, oh, well, we're going to be the listing, search, and the financing, and we service you for 30 years. But I worry, or I'm asking, there isn't really a depth of value yet that Rocket has figured out. And maybe that's true of all servicers, but Rocket's the one like most desperate to figure it out, that actually can say, like, own the dream was their commercial. But one of the things I want to ask you about was like, what do you do for me after I close? How are you helping me? It's not a 30-year relationship, really. It is on paper, but I think it could be misunderstood as a 30-year relationship, when in reality, like, is there depth to the relationship once you close? And how would you solve for that? If you're homes.com, if you're rocket.com, like, am I just too optimistic that there would ever be like a true value proposition and we should just leave it as everybody in their silos, like everybody do your job type of thing and don't try to do more? Or is it realistic that like homes.com will compete more directly with the lasting part of the pipeline and that Rocket will figure out a way to matter after closing?
Yeah. Well, there's probably 30 questions in there, but
yeah, that's why I'm letting you take it wherever you want.
Let me carve out the homes.com piece, I guess, first versus Rocket piece for a second. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like homes.com, I don't know, you got to think it's probably kind of a Trojan horse type thing where like they're trying to compete with Zillow first in Zillow's core arena, right? Like viewing listings, getting eyeballs on listings. They're driving unprecedented amounts of paid media to force is not the right word, but drive people to listings, and charging agents not a lot of money to do it. So I think it's like a lot of, really well-funded companies trying to make headway into a space, like they're picking like a beachhead or whatever. So that isn't that surprising. They're just putting a tremendous amount of resources behind like being Zillow's nemesis, being, going head to head with Zillow. But Zillow, meanwhile, has doubled their mortgage business in the last 12 months, doubled their purchase business. I've heard that they've grown other channels as well. Is expanding all kinds of different versions of Premier Agent. NewZip kind of competes with Zillow in a few ways, as in our carved out niche. So we keep pretty good tabs on them. Homes.com is not, that I've seen, taking a broader view yet, but I have to think that this is just like compete in Zillow's and maybe Realtor.com and maybe Redfin's core competency. Get in there, they claim to be number 2. They maybe are, depending on how you measure it. Claim to be close to number 1, depending on how you measure it. I don't think they're close to Zillow yet, but take that for what it is. They're putting a tremendous amount of resources on competing. And then probably once they get that mind share, once they get those eyeballs, they expand, right? I mean, their CoStar has a lot of other things under their umbrella.
True.
I'm no expert on that, but I'm sure that there's a lot of other strategies under the hood once homes.com reaches some level of penetration, some level of Zillow competition, basically. But yeah, then you have rocket.com. That's still feels weird to say. You have rocket.com, which wraps together a lot of things: personal finance apps, title, mortgage, and real estate, at least. Probably other things we don't know about that are in the lab now that I haven't worked there in 5 years. But it's you have to think that Rocket is the verticalized, like they're trying to get a smaller amount of people in there and keep them there. Homes.com is trying to get every person in the US onto their site right now and paying to do it. So the monetization is super different. The lifetime value is super different. Lifetime value for homes.com right now is super thin. They're just trying to get agents to pay monthly subscriptions, right? That's there's probably more, but that's most of it. So they're almost like a data business, where Rocket's a pretty broad financial services company, or at least heading that way. home ownership company, whatever. Yeah, I don't know what terminology they use these days, but yeah, so they just have very different games they're playing, and I think the ads reflected that. Homes.com was very tactical. Rocket was very emotional. Come join our family, kumbaya, type of thing, which maybe we all need. I don't know, but it's different than the past Rocket ads, which were more tactical and more mortgage specific.
It's a shift, no doubt.
It's a huge shift, and it's a huge shift in brand to obscure the real estate brand and obscure the title brand and obscure the mortgage brand and just make it one. So that's
even title becoming Rocket Title, I thought was significant in the sense of the unified brand. Yeah. And I am sensitive to how hard it is to change people's minds. Like, one of the things I do remember from the shift from Quicken Loans to Rocket Mortgage that I've always remembered was Dan talking about how hard it is to do a rebrand. He was like, literally, Comcast to Xfinity and Quicken Loans to Rocket are the two most successful rebrands probably ever, honestly, because of how hard it is to get people to quickly change their mind on who you are and remember you as something new. So you're forced then, when you drop the mortgage, to really push the .com piece to make sure that it's first and foremost before you can then remove the .com and just be Rocket holistically. But I do think it's tough to do that really like meaningful brand work and then end it with a .com. Like, it's like, oh, okay. Like, what versus like these other brands, other brands that are standalone.
Not really part of the name, but
Right. It's not really part of the name, but they have to do that initially and then they can get rid of it. So I know we're getting more into the marketing branding side, but like, it was interesting to me. And it's interesting to me hear you talk about it that way, because I think you're right that homes.com is homes.com, is listings is data. And I think it's fun for us being in the industry to look at it, but I don't know how meaningful another listing. I said this when they launched last year during the Super Bowl. I was like, what's the thing here? Just spend $1 billion to be the same as Zillow? And so I think
got a comment in here from Chuck.
Love when we get the comments.
Yeah. So, I think this is a good reflection, right? We were actually texting about this the other day, Jeremy, Rocket's doing a lot of industry media, which is different. And they're doing a lot of consumer facing media. And I think Chuck's point is well-founded here that, Rocket is deviating pretty far from positioning themselves as a mortgage company in Detroit, and much more so as, there's all kinds of different relationships with all kinds of different professionals, including in the case that I believe Chuck is talking about, independent brokers working with what was Rocket Pro TPO. I don't know what it's called now. Rocket.com.
Rocket Pro, probably. Rocket
Pro. But so that's a great point, probably what they're going for, I imagine.
Well, I think it's a great point, because one of the first conversations I had with Brian View on some podcast, like one of our recorded conversations, wherever it was, with him, was basically, you have to have a core belief and you have to structure your strategy around it. And the core belief, I had a chance to interview Diego Sanchez from Housing Wire yesterday, and we're going to post that on YouTube today. But one of the things he said very clearly was, it takes two licensed professionals, the real estate agent and the mortgage pro, to get a consumer through the process. To me, that is a core belief you have to structure your strategy around, because I would argue there's a equally powerful group of people on the other side with a belief that says a digital mortgage approval is better than cash. And if you can deliver a better than cash experience, I'm underwritten, I'm funded, I'm ready to go, ahead of your offer, you may still use a loan officer to get to that point, or we have to get to that point, whether it's with an independent mortgage pro or whether it's with digital tools. And so there's a race, I think, the race is on to get up funnel with valid, verified, approved dollars, however you get them. And you got to structure your strategy around some core belief on what the consumer wants and what's going to be viable financially.
I think I mentioned to you that NewZip, my company, launched a new partnership today, and they gave we're early days, so I won't say anything too much about who it is at this point, but hopefully we do some press with them shortly. But a really impressive group, and they told us that 55% of their lead flow in the last 12 months came in without a real estate agent. That's been one of the prevailing beliefs of NewZip and how we've positioned our product, 100% lender partnership based, that a lot of consumers are going to lenders first. But all different lenders, all different shapes and sizes, that seems to be true. And that's got to be Rocket's bet. And that's got to be homes.com must have a strategy around it as well that they're going to back into around people seeking financial information first, people seeking mortgage approval first. And then, because they want to know if they even have a shot at buying before they get a real estate agent. And I guess 55%, is not like a massive majority, but I know in the past it was like as high as 70, 80% of people went to real estate agents first, not that long ago, like pre-COVID. Yeah. And so, it's been interesting. I feel like, you're giving me an opportunity to talk my book a little bit about what we're doing at NewZip, but I also want to go back to your one of your embedded questions a minute ago, where you were talking about what can servicers do, or what can, I don't know if you literally meant servicers or if you meant like, what can the mortgage industry in general do after closing?
Yeah, all the above.
After origination, right? So I think servicers, have a few more tools at their disposal because they have more revenue coming, for one thing, that gives them more lifetime value, but they also have more of a continuous relationship. Whereas just even compliance wise,
we have the right to talk to you. We have the right
after an originator
share
closes
data
a loan and sells off this is something I only learned by launching different types of partnerships in NewZip. There's a period of time after origination, after you sell off the loan, that you, as the originator, can't make contact with the client, literally. And so, maybe there's certain compliant ways you can, but in general, you cannot reach out to them with an offer because you sold those rights. So I'm not an expert on the compliance under the hood there, but I think that sort of is a part answer to your question, is like the servicer is actually the only one with those rights for a period of time to make contact with the client. So they do have an interesting moment there. But I do think whether it's the Rocket, the artist formerly known as Rocket Homes strategy, or like what we do at NewZip, where we give every lender their own real estate market data, their own kind of light home search that they can give to every client kind of just in time for whatever they're up to. If they're an owner, it's around the value of their current home. If they're a first-time home buyer, it's calculators around how to get there with that first purchase, things like that. There are tools that can be given both for originators and for servicers, but it does seem like you have a if you're Rocket, or if you're Mr. Cooper, announced some really successful sounding earnings numbers today. NewRez is our biggest partner today at NewZip. Like, so that, those three are, we hear about a lot, we think about a lot. They're all seem to be investing extremely heavily into extending that life cycle, right? And it's not just being happy with the servicing rights and the servicing revenue. That's great, but I think I wasn't at the MBA servicing last week, but I imagine that 50% plus of the topics were around like lifetime value and differentiation, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. And I think if you throw PennyMac in there and you Cooper, PennyMac, Rocket, NewRez, it's actually, Diego mentioned this in the conversation I just mentioned again, but it's top of mind. Like, I think a good bit of that group has been doing it quietly, or quietly enough that perhaps the rest of the industry is underestimating the power of that technology and the power of those analytics. When I think of analytics, I think of even when I was at Rocket years ago, it was propensity. Like, I just felt like we were only scratching the surface on propensity in the servicing book. And I'm sure they've made tremendous gains since then. And with AI, even more so, which is who's likely to do what? What data indicators do I have that say you're likely to do a move up, move down, refi, second lien, etc.?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is more of a threat to consolidation and to volume this time around than ever before. So yeah, if I was in these moments of like uncertainty and volatility, I think it's helpful to think like a CEO, which is, and honestly, like when I moved into the business side, you saw this transition. When I moved from the legal to the business side, like I really got comfortable with the product manager mindset, the product development mindset, which is like put a question out there and see if your team can challenge that question, or see if your team can do things that create value out of a challenge question or a spark question. And that product manager mindset from software came into everything that we did. And I think here I'm thinking of several examples. I mentioned one already. If I was on the origination side, digital or otherwise, how am I better than cash? How am I ahead of, better than, stronger than, more certain than the cash buyer? That would be my single question. If I was trying to drive purchase business, trying to buy purchase leads, whether it's at NewZip, Lower.com, Rocket.com, Better.com, like where the ever.
Yeah.
If I was running a servicing platform, my number one question would be, what does the American homeowner need? What's the American homeowner need? What's the most important thing? What are the three things? What does the American homeowner need right now from me? If I was running a government affairs group for Rocket or for one of these IMBs or big banks right now, I'd be asking a single question. Is this good for the American renter? Does this help people achieve the American dream? If it is, great. If it's not, we got to question it. Like, just make it in these moments where it gets crazy in terms of all of the information coming at you, all the things coming at you. Just boil it down. Like, what do we have to do to be better than cash? What do I have to do for the American homeowner? What do I have to do for the American renter? What do they need? It's very, very straightforward. And I love that. And that you can even hear, I'm getting fired up, even though it's after 1 and I'll probably have to drop soon. But
yeah,
that's what I would do.
We started using the terminology at NewZip with our we're 100% partnership based, right? So everything we do is on behalf of an originator, a servicer, or both, right? So we've been using the terminology that I really like, offense and defense, right? Like we're playing offense when we're helping generate new leads, when we're helping give things that other people aren't. But just playing defense and keeping people in your ecosystem seems to be a lot of what's going on today, because people are going those 7 years without transacting or whatever. That number shifts. Maybe it's longer now. Maybe 10 years now. It was 5 years during COVID, 7 years before that. But people go 10 years without buying a house, right? So you gotta play defense, keep them in your ecosystem, give them that product manager mindset of what can we do for the owner, what can we do for or for the earlier funnel leads, like you get from like more of the fintech type plays like Rocket Money or FinLocker, things like that. You think about how we keep people engaged for the 24 months until they can buy, or the 36 months until they can buy their first home. Right. So there's some really meaty questions there. That if Brian hadn't started his own podcast that conflicted with our time, he could have stayed on and answered from his perspective. But at NewZip, we kind of think of it that way of like, there's the table stakes of giving consumers the things so they stay off Zillow, and they stay off, if you're another lender, stay off Rocket.com.
Yep.
That's the defense. But then, there's a tremendous amount of offense that could be played around any number of innovations in client experience and really around product. So I think, maybe the most positive read, which there's not maybe that many positive reads on what's gone on the last week or so, is that maybe there will be some more courage to do some hopefully consumer benefiting innovative products and innovative programs. So hopefully that's the best thing that could come out of this. Obviously,
my position was nothing was holding you back before, but if you needed this to pay attention, fine, let's do it. Because now is the time. So I'm working on it. I look forward to continue to work on it. It's always good. I got cut off on my big closing line. I was just saying.
I can hear you again now. You're still live.
I was just saying, like, if you needed this to spark you, you should. But I'm working on it. I know you're working on it. We're going to continue to work on it. Like, this is the stuff that does matter to people, real people,
Yeah.
in the world. And I'm excited. So yeah, man.
And there's tremendous pent up demand of people that want to buy homes, you know, at the end of the day, right?
Well, we got to get people owning things. We still believe it should be real estate equity in the end, but like the ownership economy, equity in something, and that still can mean a house, that still can mean real estate, but you got to get ownership of things, brands, companies, real estate in order to get ahead. That the American Dream 2.0 is the ownership economy. And I'm going to keep saying it because I would love to be associated with it. Like it is, you have to own things, equity, and it can be equity in a variety of shapes and forms. But we got to get more people owning more of the economy, the community that we all share. That's going to be the thing that drives both innovation and stability. Because when you have a job and you have generational wealth accumulating, you can help your family, you can help your community, and everybody feels tied in together more than when we're divisive and fighting over a limited pool of resources in a zero-sum game. And I don't buy it. I don't think it's a limited sum or a zero-sum game with limited resources. I think it's an ownership economy. And if we expand it and everybody understands a path to ownership of equity in the future in whatever shape and form, digital assets, real estate, brand, company, we all win. So that's my pitch for the next week.
And closing remarks. Boom. Mic drop.
All right, man. Good to see
All
you.
right.
I'll call you later. Bye.